Joe, we continue on the deep dives here. We've continued and started, and we'll do some of these teams again, but we're just already are doing some of them. But, Joe, pretty much post-spring here about the Alabama Crimson Tide going into it. When you look at the Alabama Crimson Tide going into the 2025 season, look, coming off of a 9-3 regular season, 9-4 in the bowl game, I think a lot was made of what happened a year ago, and we've talked about this. Post Nick Saban, oh my God, you go 9-3, everybody, sky's falling. No, my God, Alabama's no more. But they're back, and they're trying to rebuild. There was a lot of things that Alabama had to overcome. They have a new quarterback. They got a new offensive coordinator. A lot of things are overturning here. When you look at 2025 Bama, Joe DeLeone sees exactly what?
I got to be honest. I have a hard time getting a pulse for this Alabama team because we're so used to knowing that Alabama was just always going to have a competitive roster. We always knew that there was going to be some not unheralded, but some 5-star recruit that was just going to take over, that was going to step up to the plate. There was some freshman that had a big season the year prior that we knew, oh, this guy's up next. He's going to be the next first-round pick. This is going to be the next Will Anderson. He's going to be, Bryce Young is going to take him over the top. Even in their weakest times in Nick Saban's last year, they still reached the college football playoff. I feel like there's two things that I know about this team. I know that they're returning multiple starting offensive linemen, Caden Proctor, Parker Brailsford, who are important players. And I know that they have one of the best receivers in the country, orchestrated by Ryan Grubb, who is a brilliant offensive coordinator. And we know that Kalen DeBoer is a great offensive coach. But the uncertainties to me, I think, might hold him back because I just don't really know how this defense is going to look. Are they going to play a lot better than they did last season because they were a liability at times throughout their schedule in some of their worst games? And is the current quarterback situation enough for them to bounce back and to take a step forward from the inconsistencies of Jalen Milroe? A lot of questions, and I don't know if there is really a lot of answers.
I think you just said that perfectly. I don't know what to make of them. Now, a lot of that, I think, for me, has to do with what happens at quarterback. Because I think if you knew what you were getting at quarterback, you would feel as if a lot better of the direction of where they could go. Here is a truth. We thought that Jalen Milroe would be better than what he was. Mm-hmm. I don't think, for what it's worth, Kalen DeBoer put him in right situations. I don't. How do you have that many offensive linemen drafted and one that will be drafted next year in Caden Proctor and not be better than what you were running the football? Joe, I will tell you this. I understand that Kalen DeBoer got to a national title 2 years ago. But, Joe, they got away from running the football too much. They tried to take a quarterback that had struggles throwing the football down the field and not utilize his strengths. I know he got beat up some. I know that there were some situations. Joe, you had to go into last season running the football. I know that Jan Miller is coming back for his senior year. I understand that you have some good young guys like Richard Young, Dre Washington comes in, Daniel Hill at running back. I know that you feel like that you have a decent core. But in the league like the Big Ten and the SEC, this isn't the Pac-12. You can't throw you're not going to be in crucial situations. You're not, unless you have an elite guy at the signal caller, you got to pick up and run the football. Joe, let's go back to the 3 games that they lost. Even the 4th one in the bowl game, what did they get away from? They try to get pass happy against Oklahoma. They try to get pass happy in the second half versus Tennessee. They try to get pass happy in the second half versus Georgia. And luckily they won that game, but they almost didn't. And a young 17-year-old had to take a bomb that they threw, a Hail Mary goddamn near, and he took it to the house. You almost lost it. They got away from what should have been the identity. Offensively, I know that you bring in Isaiah Horton. I know that you bring in Cam Dewberry. You have some interesting things that you may be able to do along the offensive line. Parker Brailsford's back. Jaden Roberts is back. Formby, can he get a good start at be a good right tackle? I know that you bring in some other weapons there. You go out and get Brody Dalton, the tight end that I know a lot of people wanted. There's a lot of pieces that you're trying to add. What does Ryan Grubb bring in as a signal call, as a play caller for you? How big of a difference is that going to be? I think it will be a big difference. But Joe, the identity got away. The identity last year got away from them. So when I look at them, there's talent all across the field for Bama. It's not like Bama doesn't have freaking talent. They got talent everywhere. You bring back Ryan Williams. You bring back Jeremy Bernard. You bring in Isaiah Horton. That could be a really damn good wide receiving core. We saw what you did 2 years ago with a damn good receiving core. That could be that. The question for me offensively, I don't know what I get in Ty Simpson. And Nick always got the benefit of the doubt there because he should have always gotten the benefit of the doubt there. But there's one other thing that I look at defensively when I look at them specifically. Joe, I see guys like LT Overton, Justin Jefferson returns, Deontay Lawson returns, Keon Sabb is there. They got pieces. Joe, they had those same pieces a year ago, and they refused to run things defensively, and it beat them. So not only offensively do I feel like that they got away from some of their identity, I felt like that the identity that defense should have had last year was not there too. Who are you? That's the thing for me for Bama. Who are you really? Because you got to flush the Saban era. You got to flush it. It was fantastic, but when you go into who are you? What is your identity? What does Bama do well? What does your team do well? Can you call plays and get guys in the area where they can make those plays? That's why I thought Bama was not a playoff team a year ago. When the going got tough, they got away from what they do best.
I think that's a really strong way to put this, is like trying to find that identity. But with some of the questions on defense, there are some aspects of this roster that I actually think have tremendous upside. I really like LT Overton. I think that he is going to be a tremendously productive pass rusher this year. I think he's going to take a step forward. We knew that he was a very gifted player when he was coming into Texas A&M as a recruit. I think that their secondary can be really underrated this season. I really believe that Alabama has a sneaky good defensive backfield. Damani Jackson, who came in from USC, Xavier Brown, both those guys were young last year. They had a lot of flashes on film. I think both are guys that could eventually be very highly drafted players when they do declare in separate seasons. And then we're also starting to hear that Dejoun Lee is lighting things up as a true freshman, the 5-star corner that they brought in. Yeah. So that's
well, to your point, our good friend Clint Lamb said he was the winner of spring. If we want to throw that, we talked about
right,
Lee, but Clint even brought up that he might have been the winner of spring.
We're talking about getting back. Or not getting back to finding the new identity for this team. One of the things that historically has made them so great, because Nick Saban was a defensive back-minded coach, is having elite secondaries. So I think that one of the first key steps for Kalen DeBoer bringing this team, maybe not to a national championship winning level in year 2, but to a college football playoff team and a team that wins college football playoff games, is if their secondary returns to that elite level of play. You look at across the conference, you're dealing with matchups, you're dealing with having to face off with quarterbacks that are potentially budding stars. If you reach the college football playoff, you're going to have to go up against Drew Aller and Cade Klubnik. You're going to have to deal with Lenora Sellers. You're going to have to deal with Arch Manning. There are going to be a lot of challenges. So having a good secondary with those 3 guys that we just mentioned, I think is a way that they start to return to form. I really like the way that question mark is starting to show some glimmers of answers for me.
So you're bringing up Dejoun Lee. Let's see what the young true freshman can bring for you. I don't want to spend a lot of time on a spring camp true freshman kid.
Yes.
And, I know that Clint and others have brought him up. And look, I don't think that there's anybody that covers Bama better than Clint, if I'm just being honest. He's excellent at what he does. And listen, when a guy like that puts his stamp on it, I trust the stamp, right? So I'll give him that. But you bring back Bray Hubbard, who had 3 picks last year. Okay, you got Justin Jefferson and Deontay Lawson coming back. You are replacing Jahad Campbell, who the Eagles are going to eagle, by the way, just for everybody. They constantly do it.
They also took Smile Munden, which was hilarious,
which is freaking insane. But I look at them and say, Joe, when you look at them from a roster to roster standpoint, talent v talent, again, I agree with you. Like, hey, man, I look at the secondary. They've done a lot of really good things. They got a lot of really good players. What was their problem a year ago? Why did they lose to Vandy?
Well, they couldn't tackle. They couldn't tackle Diego Pavia.
Well, not only could they not tackle, I remember we were talking about this during the season. They refused to make changes defensively, and they got eaten alive. That secondary didn't suck a year ago. All of these guys that we're talking about making leaps in the year two of Kalen DeBoer, they're coming back, right? Like, these are guys that are coming back. They were there. I do think that they have a problem play calling defensively in some areas. I do.
I agree with that.
Okay. And so you're going to have to be a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for here?
Creative, consistent.
Fair. That's fine. Creative. Joe, I look at them. I never thought I'd ever see a Bama team that didn't have a player that didn't have at least 5 sacks or more.
The defensive line is where my antenna go, my panic meter goes up. Where I'm hold on now. What's going on here?
Pause. Do you remember what happened a year ago when I said that their D-line looked like that they got cooked in that spring game? You remember that?
Yep.
You remember the outright hate that I took from Bama fans?
Well, Bama fans don't like you anyways. So.
Well, they did when I said that they were going to win. And listen, well, it wasn't wrong. So to your antenna point, go ahead and hit it.
Well, that was it. Is that that's the one thing that I'm kind of questioning is how good is their defensive line going to be? I mentioned that I have high hopes for LT Overton, and I think that LT Overton's going to be the anchor of that unit. But I just kind of see a bunch of names, I just don't really truly feel who's the ass kicker, who's the Christian Barmore, who is the Jonathan Allen, who is the Deron Payne, Quinnen Williams. I don't know who that is. I just don't. It's one of the more. It's going to come off as really critical. I'm sure I'm going to get yelled at for this. It's one of the most pedestrian-looking Alabama defensive lines that I've seen, and I don't say that meaning that they've got nobodies. It's just I don't feel like it has that same cachet. It doesn't have that same sexiness that we talk about with Alabama defensive lines. It's a new coaching regime, so things are going to go differently. But that is one thing that is completely why I'm saying that I'm uncertain about what happens this upcoming year because of their D-line.
To your point, Russ Shaw got a sack last year. He did have 2 interceptions as a linebacker. Defensive line, Joe, 2.5 sacks, 2 sacks, 1 sack. Their tackles for loss, there's only one – No defensive lineman last year, as I'm looking at it right now. None of them had 4 tackles for loss plus.
Exactly my point.
Right.
Exactly my point. Who's the big dog? You want to read through their schedule though before we close this out?
One last point I would make on them, if you don't mind me going.
Go ahead.
I do think they have enough talent to get to a playoff, without a doubt.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
But it's going to come down to 2 things. What can Ty Simpson or Austin Mack be for you? But then secondly, Joe, if they don't start changing things up defensively, now that you're going into year 2 and teams have had a full off season to go against you, you're going to get your asses pieced up.
That to me, those are the 2 questions that you kind of lead me into my final point before the schedule. Quarterback play needs to live up to expectation of what Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer are supposed to get out of their quarterbacks. Now they get the huge benefit of having one of the best receivers to throw to. And one thing we know in college football, if you have if you have a top 5 receiver in Ryan Williams to throw to, it will solve a lot of your problems on offense.
Yeah.
A lot of times, a lot of defenses can't just completely shut down receivers. Very few defenses can do that unless you're as good as Texas's was last year.
Well, and they just double teamed him. Let's just call it what it is.
Right.
And then somebody, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton, somebody's got to step up here. So, yeah. Right. All right. Alabama's schedule. Go at it, Joe.
They start at Florida State versus ULM versus Wisconsin at home. Bye week at Georgia. So this is where we start to get a little sticky. They host Vandy, which I'm sure that they're going to want some really brutal revenge. At Missouri, they get Tennessee at home. They go to South Carolina, which I'm sure that's going to be a night game. Bye week, home against LSU, home against Oklahoma, home against Eastern Illinois, and at Auburn. So my attention is drawn to the fact that they go to Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, and Auburn, and you're still hosting LSU, but LSU's pissed off about losing last year. So we're talking about
they're never going to give LSU a win there. They're just never going to do that.
5 hard games, though, 4 shitty road games.
I mean, they come out of the gate at Florida State.
They should win that. They'll win that.
They better.
Yeah.
I mean, they better.
They're significantly better than Florida State.
Without a doubt. There's nothing that – now, I will say this. You have not seen them. No one's seen them. Okay? You have no idea what the hell that they're going to do. You have no clue what Florida State looks like. Just if they don't beat them by 20 plus and everybody freaks out, you better not do that because you have no idea what they're going to look like. And guess what? Malzahn always has Alabama's number. He could be 6-6. It won't matter. He's going to find a way to get offense going. You don't do that to yourself.
It's fair.
Regardless, I would take them to win that game. I'm going to take them to win against ULM. I'm going to take them to beat Wisconsin. Joe, Tennessee and Alabama go into Athens. I don't think either team wins there. I don't give a shit who you are. So I think like that's a loss. I think they get ultimate revenge on Vandy. I'm hearing some craziness out there on Pavia, by the way. Like got his money. I don't know how much he really loves football at the current moment. I'm going to throw this your way.
Okay.
At Missouri, at South Carolina. If that South Carolina game's at home, that's a losable game. I mean, if that game's at night, that game's losable.
So to me with that, like their season success comes down to their ability, this is why this is like a really difficult spot for Alabama this upcoming year. Them getting to a playoff comes down to them beating Missouri and South Carolina on the road. And then assuming that they don't drop any of these home games. That is where a playoff is going to hinge on that. That is a difficult variable.
Well, look, you talk about some of those home games. Like, do they want revenge versus Oklahoma? But how good or bad is Oklahoma? You do have Auburn on the road. That game's always close. I mean, look, you got Tennessee at home. What the hell is Tennessee? I mean, we have no clue. So in reference to Bama, Joe, I'll just say this. I think that you can be a playoff team. The problem well, no, it's a problem. The problem that I have as an individual is I don't know if you have an identity yet. Have you found your identity? If you find it, you make a playoff. If you haven't, you're going to be exactly back where you were. And listen, Ty Simpson couldn't beat out Jalen Milroe.
He was also a couple years younger, so I give him a little bit of grace. And Jalen Milroe's incredibly physically gifted. So,
but it's just such a horrible style of what they tried to do. You should be able to beat out Jalen Milroe as a passer. If you can't beat him as a thrower.
I don't know if I totally agree with that, but I see what you mean.
All right. We'll see. Find your identity. You'll find the playoff.
I agree with that. It is going to be tough sledding, though. It's one of the harder schedules that we've looked at, and if you've got as many question marks as you do and you don't resolve most of them, it's going to be a tough
D-line thing. Your D-line thing. Everybody thinks – now, look, Shane Beamer is going to do the most Shane Beamer thing. I'm a little down on South Carolina this year, but I'm not down on Lenore Sellers.
No.
I'm not down on Nick Harper. Don't play around with them. People – now, they got a lot to replace. They're replacing the biggest freak in the draft in freaking Nick Emmanwori.
Right. And the amount of, like, when I was doing evaluations, the amount of guys that, like, South Carolina players that I was writing down that I was like, oh, this player is insanely athletically gifted. they had so many really good athletes that moved on to there's like six guys that moved on to the NFL.
Kyle Kennard got drafted in the 3rd round.
Kennard,
right?
Demetrius Knight, Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, Nick Emenwari. That's 5 guys. That is a shitload. South Carolina preview is going to be brutal.